Welcome everybody to Overgrove episode 2. Thanks for joining us. Today, Boss and myself will be talking about the latest PTR update and a potential release date leaked from a French retailer. So, let's get started. How you doing today, Boss?
I'm doing decently well. Looking over some of this exciting information that we got up here. Well, how are things with you, man? It's been a pretty exciting week.
Yeah, it has. We did get a PTR update later than I anticipated, but a PTR update nonetheless. We were talking last week about possibility of getting Echo. Looks like that didn't happen. However, we did get some rather interesting things nonetheless. We got what we expected, which was the queue activities, which they're calling While You Wait, which gives the group leader, or if you're crewing solo, can decide whether you go into the practice range as a group, which is interesting. I didn't expect them to do that. I expected it to be an individual choice. You can do skirmish as normal, a death match with your group members, which sounds interesting, and just standard custom games that you can choose to do. So sounds like they're addressing the long queues with nothing to do.
I mostly main tank or support, not a huge, or when I do DPS, it's normally grouped up with somebody. But it is definitely deflating. When you queue up as a DPS, you have an 8-minute queue, you get into the game and someone leaves, which happens. Someone gets DC'd, and you have to okay, I guess I'm going to wait for 20 minutes, even 30 minutes to play the game. This is really good. So I know there's people out there who only DPS. They have no desire whatsoever to support, especially later in the day, depending on what region you're in. Queue times can be 8, possibly even 10 minutes. So now people can get in there and do their skirmishes, their practice range, their death matches. The death match thing is interesting. And it says complete for a top place on the scoreboard, which means they're actually going to have a kill count. I don't know if that'll be a free-for-all or team-based. That's interesting.
By the sounds of it, it'll be a free-for-all deathmatch. If you're not concerned about score, then skirmish would be your choice. So they're giving people the choice whether they want to keep score or not with that. So that's fair enough.
When I rolled out of bed that morning, it was yesterday morning, I looked at my phone and I saw the PTR changes. It took me a minute to wow, those are really big changes. This is going to change a lot of how we currently play Overwatch, especially competitive.
Yeah, definitely. The changes to tank are significant. They've really shaken things up there. It looks like they're trying to get away from barrier watch, which has been a problem since Sigma was added, where there are just barriers everywhere.
Especially as an Orisa player, I get incredibly tired of shooting shields. And it's a constant. Normally, one of the things I say the most is shoot the barrier, take the barrier down. He still has his barrier. And you can tell immediately when the enemy team is focusing your barrier down. Number one, what they're doing is they're increasing the damage reduction from armor. A while back, they reduced this, I believe, in an attempt to get rid of goats. They wanted to get rid of that game model, that game style, which everyone was tired of. So now they're bringing the damage reduction is being increased. It's going from a 3 to a 5. And this is for this is just general flat out armor damage.
Yeah, I believe they did change it from 5 to 3 in the past, and that was,
I believe so, yeah.
In part to deal with goats and Brig as well, because Brig relied a lot on armor, which she relies less on now.
Orisa's base armor has increased from 200 to 250. Her movement speed penalty has been reduced from 30 to 20. And you might say, well, that's only 10%. But I've tried it on the PTR, and it's going to make tracking targets a lot easier. When people are moving side to side, it will change tracking them, especially with her rate of fire. Huge difference with that.
Things like that don't sound that great, but once you use them, once you get a feel for them, it's a massive difference, yeah.
What they're doing is for her protective barrier, they had already increased the time for the cooldown. They're reducing the HP from 900 to 600. And the cooldown for Fortify is being decreased from 10 to 8 seconds. So we're really talking, you're going to see a trend where fast movement, tanks are going to have more reliance on their actual abilities, less on shields, and they're going to be able to move forward. Press the W button, moving forward.
It's the same all the way down, really. Reinhardt's barrier is being reduced by 400 hit points from 2,000 to 1,600. His movement speed penalty is being halved from 50 to 25, and his knockback resistance with his passive is being increased to 50% from 30. So he'll be more mobile because he needs to be, generally.
I have not tried the passive, the knockback resistance. I haven't experienced that. But I can tell you the movement speed penalty reduced from 50 to 25, you are marching. You pull up your shield and you're just, the speed is like you have a Lucio with you at all times. You're just marching forward. It takes a little bit to get used to the movement, but it changes so much, especially when you try to go through a choke. You're trying to get around the corner. You're trying to get into a room. So instead of you just going slowly, losing your shield. So I know that it's super hard. I know it's got to be hard to try to balance the game and to get everything kind of balanced out because you're lowering their shield, but you're increasing their walking speed. It's huge. The movement speed penalty reduced from 50% to 25%. If you get a chance to go into the game and play it on the PTR, it's almost like a completely different game.
While you're holding the shield up, you'll get into the fight faster, so you don't need it as much as you're getting into the fight, which means that 400 hit points isn't as much of a concern because the rate you're getting into the fight means you're losing less hit points on your barrier anyway.
Right.
It just makes him much more mobile and much more able to keep pace.
And you also have to remember that they've increased the damage reduction from 3 to 5 for armor, so you're still going to take less damage with that yellow bit on your bar. You're taking less damage from that. On Sigma, yesterday, someone mentioned that they basically nerfed him so badly. They say they nerfed my boy Sigma. And when you look at it, it says his barrier's health has been reduced from 15 to 900. It sounds terrible. Barrier health regeneration rate's went from 150 to 120 health per second, but they've reduced the cooldown from his kinetic grasp from 13 to 10. That's huge. Damage to shield gain ratio has been increased from 40% to 60%. So he's going to be able to gain on all projectile incoming damage an extra 20% to a shield on himself, and his cooldown of his kinetic grasp has been reduced. And a lot of times it feels like when I need that ability, it's on cooldown, and it feels like it's like right around 2 to 3 seconds before I can use it again. So that's huge. I'm definitely going to start using Sigma more.
Sigma is really powerful, and the 1500 barrier did seem like quite a lot when I was playing him, so I'm not surprised they're nerfing that by quite a significant chunk.
Least we forget, Winston, his barrier has 700 HP. So it's more than Orissa's, but it still has a longer cooldown when you drop the bubble. I forgot exactly what it was. So it's another thing that we haven't touched on, but basically it's kind of like Dive is going to be coming back.
Time will tell. It's certainly possible. If Barrier Watch is being killed, some other meta has to come along and replace it.
Right.
And that might be Dive. Especially since some of the other heroes are being changed as well.
Do we want to talk about Moira? Moira's Biotic Grasp healing has been reduced from 4 to 3.25, and it's 80 HP to 65 HP per second.
Moira could output a huge amount of healing if everyone was grouped up, because her healing was similar to how Mei's primary fire works, in which it goes through everyone. So if everyone was grouped up, she could heal a huge amount of HP. If there's 5 people in front of her and she's doing 80 health per second to each of them, that's 400 health per second. And that's more than Zenyatta's Transcendence. I'm not surprised that that's getting nerfed.
Once again, it has to be hard for the developers to pick and choose what they're doing because you don't know how it's going to affect the game. So when you're pushing through a choke with Reinhardt, you have less barrier, you're moving faster, but they've reduced Moira's healing output. So we're going to have to see how all that comes into play when we get into the game. D.Va, and I know there's a lot of people in my chat who love D.Va, and they just continue to use her even though everyone yells at them and says that they're throwing. Her defense matrix cooldown has been decreased from 2 seconds to 1.5.
A 25% reduction in the cooldown is significant. Only half a second, that's not going to make a huge difference, but no, it's a 25% reduction. That's going to definitely help. Blizzard have been in two minds about Defense Matrix, it seems. They've buffed it and nerfed it, and then buffed it again, and then nerfed it again. So we'll see if this iteration of Defense Matrix will hold.
I really like D.Va, but she requires a lot of skill and a lot of game awareness because what makes D.Va so incredibly powerful is her ability to consume projectiles, incoming damage, reducing the enemy team from getting their ultimates. The one thing that separates a lot of SR brackets is your ability to track ultimates. And D.Va's main purpose is to, and similar to Sigma's, is to eat an ultimate. And you have to keep track of the enemy team. You have to know when they've got their ultimate. And they're trying to bring her back to where it makes it a little easier for you to do that.
With the changes to the rest of the tanks, they want to give tanks more ability to participate more in the fight, it seems. When there's going to be less barriers, there needs to be more fighting. Because just sitting behind barriers for the whole fight, just shooting from behind a barrier and the other team doing the same thing, it's not very exciting.
Nope.
And one thing Blizzard was probably trying to do, not just to make the game more exciting to play, but also to watch with Overwatch League. I feel like that's something they're thinking about when balancing the game as well.
Yeah, the XQC had made that comment back when barriers were just horrible, because that's all you did. He made that comment about how incredibly hard it is, because Blizzard has to balance the game for casual people. They have to balance it for the people who are, just starting to kind of figure out the game. They got to balance it for the people who are trying to ascend, and they have to balance it out for the Overwatch League. And they have to make sure it's still fun to play, because nobody wants to play a game that's overcomplicated. I know that people like to complain about it, but it's really complicated. And to touch on what you said, as soon as we were going over the PTR changes yesterday, someone in my chat said, "Oh, Widowmaker's going to have a blast." Well, Blizzard thought of that, and they've increased her cooldown, has increased from 10 seconds to 12 seconds for her grappling hook. So they're hoping that by reducing her ability to get away, that will allow you to counter her.
Well, it's not just getting away, it's repositioning. Yeah, Widowmaker players will just have to take a little more care in positioning themselves properly, because they have less ability to reposition themselves when they need to. It's not a massive change. It's only a 20% increase on cooldown, but it may make a bigger impact than it seems.
We have Torbs. One of the things that does happen when you play Torb is he does seem kind of off when he loses his turret. So once he throws his turret down, if it gets immediately eliminated, Torb is kind of like, well, I need to reposition, I need to do something else. So they are reducing the cooldown on his overload from 12 seconds to 10 seconds. And actually, in the developer comments, they said that the difficulty in extending team fights once his turret is eliminated, and they're hoping that the change in overload will allow him to rely more on that and maybe a little less on his turret.
It should make Torbjorn players happy, I think, to be able to use overload more often, because that's a very powerful ability, and if used right, can definitely do a lot of work.
Absolutely. I've actually used it. I haven't played him in a while. I need to get back to that. Torb, hit overload, run in behind the choke, shoot the enemy team or the Reinhardt in the back, and then you can get away, similar to a Reaper without wraithing away. And before the Reinhardt even has a chance to turn around and go, "What was that?" You've already ran away. It was nice when I was doing it. I need to get back to that action. I don't play Genji, but they're increasing his ammo, his shuriken ammunition from 24 to 30. And they're saying that the average hero survivability has gone up over time. Genji can sometimes have difficulty finishing off his targets. Loosening his ammunition constraints will help give him a small boost. He's always been kind of strange to me because they refer to him as like a razor, as he just kind of shaves away everyone until he finally gets them to the point where he can dash in and kill them. And I'm like, that might be a little beyond what I can do. But 24 to 30.
It's actually quite a significant increase, because if you think about it, he throws 3 shurikens with each click. So it's 2 extra clicks on a target, and that can definitely make a huge amount of difference. If you're aiming properly, you don't need 30, but for people who are less good at aiming, it can definitely make an improvement. And for those that are better at aiming, it means more targets before you have to reload. So It helps everyone in the end.
And my gal, Zaria, one of my favorite, my go-to, quote, off tanks, her particle cannon, secondary fire, the big splash damage. Now, they made a nerf to that a while back where they originally, the more energy that she got, the wider the radius of her explosion. Well, now they are increasing her radius from 2 to 2.5, and the cost of the ammunition has been decreased from 25 to 20. And normally, I was told in chat that what I should be doing is using my primary fire more because of the nerf to the right click. So, and I find myself kind of going back to the right click because everybody's so grouped together now. So Blizzard apparently understands that. So now we're going to be able to do a little bit more damage, maybe make people not stand behind shields as much.
Well, we know they won't be standing behind shields as much because the barrier health has gone down across the board, apart from Winston, who's just sitting there saying, "I recently got buffed. It's It's all good. So it's rather interesting to see that Winston's barrier health went up, and then everyone else's in the very next patch went down by a whole lot. So I'm interested to see exactly what they're going to do with Winston, whether they're going to keep him at 700 HP, or whether they think after all of those nerfs he should be bumped down too. It'll be interesting.
I hope not. With the way I play him is I wait for my team to step in, and then I go, you're not supposed to dive in behind because you lose your escape method, depending on the map. He does require a lot of healing. You know, there's a lot of CC in the game. If he gets stunned, he can get locked down really quickly. And you got to have your jump to get away. We'll have to see, but Winston is a absolute blast to play. And I don't get a chance to do it that often because of the shield meta. So maybe now that we're backing away from Barrier Watch, we're backing away a little bit from that, maybe I can start being more of a Winston main. That'd be kind of exciting.
Yeah, we could definitely see a resurgence of Winston. And with this Zaria buff, we might see her more. She's always had a place, I find, somewhere in the meta.
Oh, yes.
And with this buff, we will probably see an increase in her usage. Her right click is pretty powerful, especially when enemies are grouped together. And with the barrier nerf, it'll be easier to get those shots in.
Right.
So it's going to be interesting, definitely.
Now, we were discussing with Overwatch 2 possible release dates.
Yes.
And I believe that we both basically were leaning toward 2021. Was that correct?
That's right, yeah. That's what I reckoned. I interpreted them saying they'll have more to talk about Overwatch 2 next BlizzCon, as we'll have a release date to announce at BlizzCon. Now, if what I've read is true, that might be a bit later than they actually planning to release the game or announce a release date.
We have here a French retailer, I assume that's pronounced FNAC or FNAC, may have accidentally leaked the Overwatch 2's release date. The release date for the first-person shooter is listed as December the 31st, 2020. But it should be noted that on most of these websites, they do have something referred to as a placeholder, where they simply put a date there and then they change it whenever the information is released.
Blizzard themselves have been known to use that kind of placeholder. They usually put it at the end of the year that they plan to release the thing on. It's possible that this French retailer got that date from Blizzard, so Blizzard are hoping to release it before the end of 2020. It looks like they've been told they're planning to release it for at least the autumn of 2020. So it could be as early as August, September. Maybe they'll release it at BlizzCon next year or before, but we'll see on that one.
December the 31st, 2020 is also the considered release date on or before for World of Warcraft Shadowlands. It states December the 31st, 2020 on or before that date. So I would lean toward that's just a placeholder. The other comment was that is planned for at least the autumn of 2020, which I believe is like September. That would put its release date slightly before next year's BlizzCon.
Which is certainly a lot sooner than a lot of people are expecting.
Yes. If they're working whole hog on it, if they put in all this development into it, they could definitely do it. This is Blizzard we're talking about, so it is very possible for them to do it.
Yeah, definitely, and especially since I hear that they've doubled the team size in order to work on Overwatch 2 while continuing to maintain Overwatch 1.
I have nothing against it. There's nothing negative on our end because, you know, Blizzard's going to release a quality product, and if we get it in our hands sooner, that's a big thumbs up to me. I look forward to playing it.
Yeah, definitely. And I have trust in Blizzard that they'll release the product when it's ready, because they have a history of doing that. They're not going to release Overwatch 2 before it's ready and fully featured and ready to go. It's going to be really good because they're going to make sure of that, and if they need to delay it, they will, because they've done it before.
I guess this is also on the side of, since they have not shown us Echo and they haven't talked about any new heroes, maybe that's a sign that everything is going to be Overwatch 2. And that if you're looking for Echo, that's going to be part of the release. Of course, that is a very long time to go without a new hero. That can't be right. There's no way they would do that. No way. They got to give us a new hero before the release of Overwatch 2, even if it did come out by next BlizzCon. They wouldn't go that long.
I think at this point, the usual release schedule is just thrown out, because we really don't know what they're planning in terms of releases, in terms of maps, in terms of heroes. It could be any order they wish at this point, because before we knew nothing about Overwatch 2, we just assumed that heroes and maps would come out as normal on the standard release schedule, but because Overwatch 2 is looming and we don't know when that's coming, they could have cut some stuff out of the schedule, they could have moved it around, they could have compressed it so it all comes out in quite rapid succession leading up to Overwatch 2. We just don't know until Blizzard tell us. So we'll just have to hope and wait and see what they have in store.
You're exactly right, and Jeff did say that any lack of content for Overwatch is the fault of Overwatch 2. So it's very possible. You're absolutely right. We may be at a point now where we're going to get these PTR changes, and we're going to have the holiday events, but any kind of new heroes will be implemented. Of course, if that's the case, that also lends itself to more of a sooner release for Overwatch 2 than what we were expecting. That's pretty exciting news.
Definitely, yeah. And seeing as we're getting Overwatch 2 sooner rather than later, it's possible that we might start hearing about a possible beta in the next few months if the release is only, say, 6-9 months away.
That's true.
Because betas tend to take quite a while, usually 3 to 6 months at least. When it comes to Blizzard, the beta for Overwatch 1 started about a year after they announced it in 2015 and lasted a good 6 months all the way up to when they released it in May. The counter to that, of course, is that Overwatch 2 isn't a full new game in a brand new franchise. It's building on what Overwatch 1 has already done. So it's possible that if they do beta, it will possibly be maybe half the length. So maybe 3 months.
Right. And the part of the beta would, I assume, just be the co-op mode. I mean, unless they were just going to go ahead and do the visual update, because the beta part of it would be the visual, would be the push map, and then some part of the co-op mode to give everybody an experience of this is what we're working on, which we saw a little bit of that at BlizzCon. It looked really fun from what I could see from some of the other streamers who were playing it. I'm excited to play it. People ask me all the time, are you going to get Overwatch 2? And my response is, why not? Why not get it? It's more content. It's more... I've been playing Overwatch for all these years. I've been playing these heroes. I know their names. I know how to spell them. I know most of their backstories because of what they've shown. I have a bunch of Overwatch wallpapers with all my favorite heroes. You give me an opportunity to pick up a game that explores and continues more of the story, big thumbs up. I'm definitely going to play it.
Yeah, definitely. And from what I've heard, it's not just a few PvE missions here and there like Archives. It's going to be a fully fleshed story mode.
Right.
So it's a lot more significant than some people are thinking.
And once again, it's Blizzard. And Blizzard normally, they don't do anything half-cocked. They give you the content that they want to give you, and it's normally quality. Very rarely does Blizzard do anything that's not of quality content.
Oh yeah, it's definitely worth waiting for. And by the sounds of it, we won't have to wait long.
Awesome. Well, Tree Boy Dave, it has been an honor and a pleasure talking about Overwatch 2 and all these wonderful PTR changes. And someday you and I are actually going to get a chance to play together.
Yeah, of course.
Someday. Sometime in the future. I know I don't have nearly as much, Overwatch time as you do. I can try to compete a little bit. I'll be your Reinhardt.
Sounds good.
Okay. Well, you have a wonderful, wonderful rest of your day off.
Okay, thank you. You too.
Later, Doc.
Bye. So thanks for watching episode 2 of Overgrove. If you have any feedback, please feel free to leave it in the comments below. If you enjoyed this episode, feel free to share it around. Links for the articles and the PTR notes and our social media will be in the description. I will also be uploading these to SoundCloud, so I'll also be leaving a link for that in the description as well, if you feel like listening to them on the go. See you next week.